Well, here we are in Munich.
Yes,
Again, which is great.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to I know you talked about this before, but your first recollections of meeting Frank and your impressions.
Oh well, when I first met him, I thought he was turning upside down my whole philosophy about doing therapy, because he was breaking every single rule that to that moment I had learned was absolutely graved in stone. You were not supposed to do things what he did. And I had 15 years of therapy and 5 years of psychological studies, so
wow.
20 years of experience in the year 85. And I was shocked in a way, and on the other hand, it was a totally relief, because I thought, oh wow, if this is therapy, I want to learn it. I absolutely want to know what's going on here. I didn't understand anything, because it was funny and we were laughing a lot, but he was insulting people all the time. And then they said in the end, I never felt so understood before. so I talked to Frank after the first day of this workshop. I said, I don't understand it. I like it a lot, but you insult people, but there must be something more. And he said, yes, there is something more. That was the beginning of a long friendship.
So where was this then?
Where?
Whereabouts?
In Munich. What?
In Munich.
In Munich, yeah. It was a workshop. I think it was the second or third workshop that Frank did in Europe. And a colleague of mine, I had the idea, I'm sick and tired of therapy. I had so many trainings, and I did hypnotherapy and NLP training and everything. And I thought, yes, it's quite nice, but I never was really excited doing therapy. It was boring in a way to me, and it was exhausting. After 1 hour of therapy, I felt so exhausted. And so at that time, in 85, I was 39, and I thought, is this what I want to do in the next 30 or 40 years? And decided, no, I don't want to do that. And then I met this guy, Bernhard Tränkle, from the Milton Erickson Society in Germany. I had this hypnotherapy training with him, so he told me, before you quit, you have to see Frank Farrelly. And that's what I did. And that's why I'm lost. Since 85, I'm lost.
Wow. So when you first saw him, do you recollect there were any particular moments which caught your attention more, or anything that he said or did that caught your attention?
Well, first I thought this guy is so untherapeutic, and I loved it, because therapists normally, they are like a sphinx. They don't move. They don't in that time, and they act like a typical therapist, which I think is, first, it's exhausting, plus it's not real. And Frank was just a normal kind of guy. He was talking to people as if we talk now. And this was one thing. The second thing was he used humor. And at that time, now it's more established to use humor. You're allowed to do that. But at that time, humor was a no-go in therapy.
Yeah.
I found the quote. They said, if a client laughs in therapy, it's a neurotic reaction, and it has immediately to be stopped. That's what I found in the literature. And so we laughed for 3 days, all the time. It was so funny. And then I thought, it's great that you don't laugh about somebody, you laugh with him.
Yeah.
And people didn't feel hurt or insulted, they felt understood. And I thought, I've got to find out what that is. So I immediately after the workshop, I wrote a long letter to Frank, and then he answered. I thought, Frank Farrelly has answered my letter. And so I went to a couple of workshops in the next 1 or 2 years, and from the very beginning he was very often living in our house, which was very nice to get to know him better. He came with his wife June, and sometimes they were in our house for weeks. So he had this, it was kind of, he said, my home away from home. He was living in our house, went to a workshop somewhere in Europe, came back to our house. So I really got to know him. And we discussed a lot about his work because I was so fascinated. I thought, I want to learn this. I want to know what's about. So in '88, which was 3 years later, after I met him first, we founded this institute, the German Institute of Provocative Therapy, and started doing workshops. If you don't understand a thing, you've got to teach it and write books about it. Then you learn what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. And for me, the attractive thing was being a normal human being doing therapy and using humor and the speed in which a client changes. This is so fascinating, and I still am fascinated about this when I do this life work in a workshop, and you have 15 minutes to work provocatively, and sometimes you get a feedback later that people say, this really changed my life. 15 minutes, I mean, this is really short-time therapy. Yeah.
Well, that's certainly, I mean, it's certainly my experience, and also from having Frank to stay, those interactions taught me as much, if not more, than the actual workshops. And he would sometimes just make some comment where you go, wow, I never would have thought that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the parts too, that the surprise that the client has immediately. You talk about something and he is so surprised, he or she thinks, what is this? So, but it's still in the system of the client. So Keith Johnston, the improv guru, he says, stay inside the circle. And I think this is one of the things you do in provocative therapy. You stay inside the circle of the thinking of the client, but you bring aspects which he never thought before, but which he or she might have thought.
Yeah.
So you're not somebody on Mars or somebody in the universe. You are with the client, but you talk about things that some anxieties a client has in the back of his head, but he doesn't even dare to tell this to himself. Or if he tells it, he or she, how do you say this? Don't you have one word? The client.
Yeah.
If you don't want to say he or she, that the client, also if it's a fear or something the client had before, you overdo it so much that the client thinks, no, wait a minute. So he starts to differentiate.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very therapeutic way to work, because you don't tell him you have to see it in a different way. You have to see such aspect and such aspect. No, you go with a very generalized stereotype and say this is normal and this has to be, and you have no chance to get out of this, so you're too old anyhow. You won't be a success, so forget it. And then the client starts to reassure himself and to differentiate.
Yeah.
If you say all men are pigs to a woman, she will say, well, I know one who is not a pig. So she already has two categories.
Yeah.
It is helpful. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating. One of the things I thought was fascinating, and it's great to share experiences because there's so much commonality. When I first saw Frank, which was a long time after you, I thought, what the hell is it? Yeah. It's like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Yes. It's throw everything up in the air. There seems to be no sense to it, but the results are just extraordinary. And watching the clients assert themselves and take control of wanting to produce some useful direction and meaning, often within minutes, was really fascinating. Yeah. I'm interested in that. From my experiences, a lot of preconceptions people have about provocative. What do you find from your experiences with people? Because people seem to have a lot of misconceptions about what the meaning provocative is, or what that would entail.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is a thing that I think you should explain in the very beginning in a workshop or in a book or wherever, that provocative does not mean that you hurt another person, that you are mean, and that you do something which is a benefit for you but not for the client. You're always with the client. Frank always talked about this being the devil's advocate, but being very much on the side of the angels. So I think this is crucial, because we often experience that people come to our workshops and they say, yes, I am provocative, I have done this before for years, I know how to do it. And then they go out, they didn't get it in a way, especially when they went to Frank's workshops then, because Frank didn't explain his work in a very left brain way. He explained it with associations and stuff, and I sometimes found out people who just come for one day, look at some modules, some live work of Frank, and then they say, yes, I got it, I know what that is, and then they really punched the clients. So the clients were kind of destroyed in a way.
Yeah.
This is not provocative therapy in my understanding. But I wanted to also say something too. You said it looks so totally crazy, but the longer I do this, the more I can see that there is some structure in the craziness.
Yeah.
You don't use anything. And what I also experience is that some people who do this for the first time, they are so excited about their own ideas and pictures they get in their head and their memories, that they kind of think, why is this client disturbing me with my wonderful creative things? So I think the crucial thing is you are with a client. It's a directive way to treat a client, but only the process. You direct the process, but the content, what you're talking about, the client gives you the material from second to second to second. So it's a here and now thing.
Yeah.
You take whatever the client offers you, and you take it and juggle with it. And then you see, we call it, you shoot in a bush and watch if a bunny comes out.
Yeah.
And if a bunny comes out, you go ahead. Yeah. But if it's the wrong bush, you have to try a different one.
Well, I think what's interesting for me in teaching, and certainly in different places around the world, is a lot of the time people I want something to do. I want A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
And in that, because then I don't have to think about anything. And we joked over lunch almost, the client doesn't even need to be there. The therapist can just entertain themselves.
Yes.
But it's really being able to pay attention. And in a lot of sort of talk therapy, and certainly in NLP and approaches, they endlessly talk about building rapport.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like some great task that has to be undertaken in some way. And a lot of this is really being able to just talk naturally to people, but to have total awareness of what's happening.
Yeah.
And as you say, to stay within the client's world of what they're talking about, and not to want to introduce, direct, or take the person somewhere because you studied that in some therapeutic class.
Yeah. But I also think one of the crucial things is you are normal.
Yeah.
To build rapport is very easy in a matter of seconds if you really like the client. And I think this is one of the basics which we try to teach, and you cannot fake it.
Yeah.
You have to think the client is worthwhile. The client has all the resources he needs to change. The client is lovable. And I like a lot of things about the client, and then you can laugh with the client about the crazy things he does to himself. But if you don't like a client, if you think this client is hopeless or something, never use provocative therapy, because then I think it gets really destructive. And it's easy to build rapport if you like somebody. And the other one, over 90% of the communication is nonverbal, so the client gets immediately if you think I like this person, or if you think I talk as if I like him, but I don't. I think, oh, it's awful. I wish I have a colleague that I hate enough to transfer this guy to him. So, and this is the basic thing, and you always have to check. Do I still think this client is lovable? Do I still think he will make it? If you have any doubt that you think, no, he will never do it, he's too dumb, he's too old, you're not supposed to say that. But so this is for in my experience, is also a real problem for the pros, that they think I'm not authentic when I say things that I do not believe. And if you work provocatively, you are always saying things, most of the time you say things you do not believe at all. You just think maybe the client might believe it. And then you test. And the other thing is, you don't ask many questions, you just say. And then the client, he is much more emotionally in the process if you just throw him all these sentences, and he has to react. If I tell you you're much too old to change and forget it, and you will never do, because it needs a certain intelligence to change and look at you. You want to tell me I'm not too old and I'm not too dumb and so. But if I really think so, I shouldn't say that. So I always say we are very authentic in our feeling towards the client, but we are absolutely incongruent in what we think and what we say. But this has nothing to do with authenticity, because I authentically, I authentically love the client, but I talk to him as if I thought he's totally weird.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's the only approach I've ever come across in communication where the practitioner or therapist will adopt a whole range of positions totally to help the client, whether they believe it or not. It's for the service of the client, not for the service of the therapist, so the therapist feels better about it. And I think the challenge a lot of practitioners have is they find it difficult to go outside a very narrow way of working. And, you know, we did an exercise in Japan, which was this classic provocative therapy, which is sort of like, it's not you, it's everything else. And then switch to, it's all you. And a lot of people have a real hard time being able to do that. But it's all to assist the client in producing change. So I think one of Frank's quotes was, you know, you have to throw out your professional dignity in the service of the client, which I think is just very, very true.
Yeah, that's true. But what you just said, when you say just you have one position and then the other one, I found out when you do a therapy interview with a client, and he doesn't know, should I do this or should I do that? So in my workshops we created an exercise which is similar to what you said. We say, you for 30 seconds you say, do this, and give all the benefits it has when he does. And then you say, no, I thought about it. No, it's not good for you. And then you change for 180 degrees and say, no, I think you better should do this. This is much better. And 30 seconds later, you change again. And you change ping pong, we call it. You change and change. So the client in the end said, he doesn't know anything, but sometimes after 10 minutes, the client says, now I know what to do. Or he does it later. It's a wonderful thing, because you don't give him a solution, but you bring him out of this, I cannot do anything, there is no solution, I'm stuck, and so on. So he has to, it really puzzles the client.
It gives them a totally different perspective, because I mean, I think, and it's interesting because we've done similar things where you go, well, it's not you, it's not you, it's not you. It's a long history. So they're just getting to the point of going, wow, and I go, you know what? Yeah, it is. And then they go, whoa, and I go, well, actually, probably not. And you're right, and it gives them a whole different way of perceiving things. And of course, when the session's recorded as well, which in a lot of talk therapies, things aren't recorded. It gives a third position.
Not recorded.
Not recorded.
No,
I mean, certainly in the UK where I work alongside psychotherapists, counsellors, some NLP practitioners. I don't know anyone who records sessions apart from myself.
Yeah. I don't either. But I think if you work provocatively, many people are afraid, or even if you don't work provocatively, they are afraid what the client could do with these recordings. Or maybe it shows, no, I was not perfect, or whatever. But the good thing is, when you work provocatively, you don't have to be perfect. That's very good.
But again, I had lots of examples of this. But here's an interesting question. If somebody says, what makes a good provocative therapist? What comes to mind?
The first thing and the most crucial thing for me is it has to be somebody, first of all, who loves people. I mean, who loves not only mankind but also people and the clients. That's for sure. And you wouldn't believe how many therapists hate their clients after some decades of this work because they think, I cannot hear this anymore.
Yeah.
But for me, the crucial thing is it has to be somebody who has humor in a sense that he's also able to laugh about himself. If he or she cannot do this, should never do provocative therapy, because the absurdity of our life, of our thinking, of everything we do. I mean, you can find 10 absurd things every day you do, and it's funny, and you don't have to punish you when you find this out. To laugh about it. It's human. If you think that you talk ex cathedra and you know the truth and you know how the client should react and what he really should do, I think nobody will know anybody else so good to really know what's best for him or her. The client has to find out, and the client knows emotionally if the solution is good for him or her. And if this happens, and I think it happens very quickly when you work provocatively, that the client is emotionally involved, and then he finds out, yes, I'm going to do this. But it's not a thing of a rational brain stuff. It comes from we say from the stomach. It comes, do you say this too? It comes from the stomach? That means it comes from the emotions. It comes from another place than your rational, digital, clear thing. Yes, this you have to do that, and the client sometimes says, yes, I should, but if he's only in the brain, forget it. And if you do it provocatively, he very quickly knows emotionally, yes. And if he knows emotionally, yes, I'm going to do that, it's very stable, and it will last. You don't have to do 400 hours on a couch to find this out. If the client did this switch, he will go this way. Maybe he comes again to say, yeah, I found a new problem that comes up. But with the problem we talked about, and if the emotional switch has happened, it's a, wie sagen, Selbstläufer, I don't know the English word. It's something that runs by himself.
Yeah. Yeah.